And I'm grateful, too, for the invitation to be here with all of you. Some of you might remember me from 2 years ago. I was privileged with the opportunity to come and spend an entire morning with you. We did the DISC personality perceiver and looked at our own personality types, the types of our coworkers, and what that could mean to working with one another as a team and better communicating with one another. It takes lots of different personalities to bring about diversity, and we got to see some of the diversity here at your company. Today is going to be a little different. John has invited me back to do a keynote address, and I have chosen to do the keynote address on what I'm calling the business of wholeheartedness. And before I say some more about that, I will just say a little bit more about myself and explain what in the world I do. I am Tom Elliott. I do own Deepwardly, and I'm a certified spiritual director. Now, when I tell people that I'm a certified spiritual director, many of them have this image of like a tarot card reader or a palm reader who's in a tiny building office in a strip mall trying to get people to come in and tell them what to do with their life. But that's not what it is. Some people think, oh, it's Christian counseling. You're like a Christian counselor. Well, it's not that either. A person goes to counseling because there's a problem, a difficulty that they want to work through. They're looking for some coping mechanisms to do that. But a person comes to spiritual direction because they're interested in being more conscious, more intentional in their relationship with God. And I don't tell people what to do. I simply provide a space for them to share the stories of what God has been like, who God has been for them, the ways in which they're trying to live more authentically and wholeheartedly. And it's while they share their stories that they have what I call aha moments, where they realize, oh, God was present in a way that I didn't recognize, and I'm being invited to respond in a way that I hadn't recognized. So I'm very blessed to get to do that. When I'm not meeting with about 80 men and women one-on-one each month, then I get the privilege of going around the country and even the world doing presentations and retreats for churches and businesses. And as John mentioned, doing a little bit of writing in the spare time. I live with my wife in Sherwood. If any of you have been to Sherwood, it's a suburb of Little Rock, and that's where my main office is. But I come up to these parts of the state once a month to do spiritual direction, a couple days in Rogers, and a couple of days in Fort Smith. So it's always good to be back up here. I was actually raised in Springdale, so it's always a good opportunity to come back up here and see family and friends. So that's who I am. What are we about today? We're about the business of wholeheartedness, and I did kind of play on the words here, since you are a company, the business of wholeheartedness. Why? Why the topic of wholeheartedness? Unless you've been living in a bubble, you know that there is a movement today toward wholeheartedness. And by wholeheartedness, we mean things like authenticity, integrity, vulnerability, magnanimity, generosity. How many of you have heard of Brene Brown? The #1 watched TED Talk in the history of TED Talks. Brene Brown's a New York Times best-selling author with multiple books. People like her, Richard Rohr, Ronald Rolheiser, Cynthia Bourgeault. There are men and women today who are challenging us to live wholehearted lives, to decompartmentalize our lives. For years, many of us have lived compartmentalized. We go to work and we put on the work hat. Well, this is who I'm supposed to be at work. And we try to take that hat off and go home. This is who I'm supposed to be at home. And it comes church time, we put on our best hat. Got to look good at church, right? The stained glass masquerade. We got to look good there. So we go and we look our best at church, and we take that hat off. That's exhausting. So I think it's great that there's a movement today that says, no, integrity means that we've decompartmentalized our lives and we are one person who is the same in all circumstances. And when we become wholehearted in that way, it provides us with an exciting passion, energy, availability, willingness, and generosity for the people and the circumstances of our lives. That's what we're going to look at here today. We're going to actually look at 5 principles from a guy named Ignatius of Loyola, who lived 500 years ago, and how companies are using his principles today to train wholehearted leaders and to have wholehearted employees. And if we're going to be wholehearted, then it can't just be us looking at how do we apply these to our time at the office. No, these are going to be 5 principles that can be applied to every aspect of our lives. And in fact, my hope, my prayer for today is that you leave with more than information. I will be sad if you leave going, oh yeah, Tom said some good things. Or Tom said some things. That would be disappointing because our world is already saturated in information. We don't need more information. We need transformation. We need tools that change us and make us more and more wholehearted, authentic, people of integrity. I find it fascinating that the corporate world has decided to go back 500 years to a priest who was almost kicked out of the church, and they're using his principles to learn more about how we can operate in the corporate world. The reason why they're looking at Ignatius is because his principles are so practical. There's nothing worse than a bunch of theoretical information. We want practical, tangible practices that help to transform our lives, our families, our businesses, our communities, our world. I don't know if you're with me on this, but sometimes I watch the news and it breaks my heart. We see constant examples of half-heartedness and hard-heartedness. We see constant examples of people who aren't being authentic and wholehearted. Think of the number of stories you've seen on the news where something tragic happens, the neighbor is interviewed, and they always say the same thing, don't they? The person was a quiet, nice person. I would have never expected this from them. That's a half-heartedness in that person. That's a lack of integrity that some of us see a person one way and other people see that same person a different way. We need wholeheartedness and authenticity in our world. So I'm excited to be sharing with you these 5 principles. We're going to apply them to our lives. We're going to pause a couple times this morning to apply them to your company. That might be a little scary, but we're going to do it anyway, and look at how these can transform us and the community that we're in. How does that sound?